Keyboard to the boardroom. This is the Business of Esports. The worlds of gaming and esports are evolving every day faster than ever before. With YouGov's living data, you can probe into the real thoughts and behaviors of esports fans and gamers worldwide. If you're a team, a brand, an agency, or a rights holder, you should be talking with YouGov. They're partners with the biggest names in esports and the biggest brands all around the world, driving compelling results every single day. Check out yougov.com/BOE and schedule a call with YouGov today. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports weekly news show / post podcast live stream. I am Paul the Prophet Dawalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Baratta. For those of you who are new here, welcome. What we do is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week. We look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. And best of all, we get to do it live with you guys. You get to ask questions, get in our faces. I know this is not our usual time. I'm sorry for those who are tuning in, or maybe you're missing this because you tuned in at our usual Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern slot. We had major technical issues. Unfortunately, we couldn't go live at that time. So we're recording this show. For anyone who's here live, welcome. But I assume many of you are going to be watching this after the fact. And again, apologies. We are not changing the time of the show. It is always going to be Wednesday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern time for now. But we did have technical problems this week, and we apologize to all of our listeners and our viewers. Jimmy, how you doing?
Good, Paul. Words right out of my mouth, you know. Sorry to the guys that regularly tune in live to chat with us, but for the tens and tens of thousands of you that listen offline throughout the week, it's literally no different. So we'll get through some great stories here, and they're like, "What? Let's go."
It's also just because this was such a big news week that I felt like there's so much that has happened. So much drama, like so much like juicy,
a lot of juicy news for sure
for the show that I felt terrible letting that go to waste.
I'm kind of sick of it, honestly, Paul. Like, I must have gotten 8 different stories in my inbox about the GTA 6 leak, and by the end of the day, I was like, this is old news to me. I woke up at 5 for some reason that morning, and it was the only thing flooding my inbox. And so we don't need to talk about any of that stuff. It's been done.
No, we do. That's exactly what we're going to talk about. It's all this stuff.
That's the point of the show. That's why we're here.
If we're not going to talk about that stuff, what are we doing here?
I don't know. How's your day? What's going on with you?
By the way, COD beta out. Did you try it yet?
I haven't played it. I've just been religiously watching clips and other people's opinions of it. And the third-person game mode, for example, looks pretty interesting. And I also like that they limited that game mode, so you're only playing in third-person mode with other people playing in third person. You can't switch between the two with other first-person players.
It is weird. It is weird to see COD in that.
It's definitely weird. But right, like if I spend $20 on a skin, I want to see the skin. You know, that's a great argument for enabling third person mode.
We do have one article this week on skins, which I'm going to get to. And we are going to talk about GTA 6 because we have to, because I sort of feel vindicated by the whole thing. When we had Strauss Zelnick on the podcast, and it's been a long time now, it's been maybe 2 years since he was on the show, I gave him the opportunity to announce GTA 6 on the podcast. I gave him that chance, And had they just announced it on the podcast, this leak would have been a nothing burger, right? Like it would have been totally, it wouldn't have mattered. It wouldn't even have made the news because everyone would have been like, well, he already announced it on Business of Esports. So, you know,
Yeah.
I hate to say I told you so, but I kind of, it's kind of one of those I told you so moments. If only he had announced it on the show.
For anyone else with a marketing campaign, we are always happy to work with you and rarely wrong over here.
Okay, so let's talk about what's on the podcast this week. Which, if you're here live, you've probably already seen the podcast episode this week because it's already out. And it was my interview at Next World Forum with His Royal Highness Prince Faisal, who is the president of the Saudi Esports Federation. And it was a really fun interview that I did with him on his view of like Saudi Arabia and esports in Saudi and all those kinds of good things. But I figured as a consequence, we should let's start with something relevant or related in the news, which is this week. It was supposed to be announced at Next World Forum, and it got delayed. But Saudi basically announced their giant sort of country's vision or plan for gaming and esports in the region. And basically, this came directly from the Crown Prince, from MBS, announced a plan to develop the country's gaming and esports industry. It says aiming to create 39,000 jobs and boost GDP by 13.3 billion by 2030. So they're calling this the National Gaming and Esports Strategy. I'm not going to open the PDF. There's like a PDF attached to it that sort of outlined the strategy. I will say, and this may be totally a coincidence, a lot of stuff seemingly borrowed from my own work for them, but maybe a total coincidence.
That's the highest form of flattery, Paul.
Imitation is the highest form of flattery. I am flattered by the level of imitation, both of this show and of many of the ideas I brought the kingdom. And anyway, so 20 government entities are going to be involved here, 86 new initiatives, which is a lot. And what they're saying is one of the targets they've set is they want studios in the kingdom to produce more than 30 games by 2030. And in fact, it says plans to develop 30 competitive games by 2030. This is an additional article that I brought up just because it supports the other one. So they want to have 30 competitive games essentially developed in the country by 2030, which is, 8 years from now, not even 7 years, 7 and change. That's a lot. And they talk about how there'll be different areas of focus, including tech, hardware development, game production, esports competition, infrastructure, regulations, education, talent acquisition, financing, etc. So very ambitious plan. Very cool to see this at a national level. I'm curious, Jimmy, A, what you thought in the news, and B, maybe specifically this one secondary article I brought up, which is the 30 competitive games, what you think of that.
Yeah, this is a loaded question and topic here, and one of the great you referenced your interview with Prince Faisal, and one of the great excerpts, I think, and I can't remember if we got that recorded or not, where he had mentioned wanting to increase their GDP with by gaming by that amount in the interview, and then the announcement came thereafter. So we kind of got a sneak peek there, I think, into just how seriously they're thinking about gaming, but also like metrics, right? Like measurable intel on what they're doing to reach those goals, right? 30 competitive titles, or increasing, X many events over the course of the year, and the spend that they were planning to do also over the next 10 years that we've been hinting at the show, just because of our relationship and work in the region. I think it's absolutely necessary that if you want to be a big player in the gaming space, no pun intended there, but if you want to be a mega, if you want to have a seat at that table, it's not enough to host events. It's not enough to have people that play games and that compete at the highest level. You need to be part of the creation, right? Part of the process. Because we know from working in this industry for a number of years now, for the last, for however long any of us have been working here, that all of these things are different mechanisms and vehicles for attention and revenue, but it all ties back to the underlying game. And if you don't have a fun game, if you don't have a captivating audience, if you don't have unique IP, then you're missing the most important part of that puzzle. So I think if they're going to develop 30 games by 2030, I mean, I think it's wow. I mean, it's a lot to chew, right? I think one or
Well,
two great
let's put this in
games.
context, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
what will a Blizzard plus a Riot plus a CD Project, three of the biggest studios in the world, like what will they combined? Oh, throw in Take-Two there. What will three of them combined put out in terms of games over the next 7.5 years?
Right.
Probably not nowhere near 30 games.
And that's 3 or 4 studios combined, right? I remember when Riot announced Valorant, which was then Project A, that was one of maybe 10 titles I think that they said that they were releasing over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And we still haven't seen, half of those. So no, I think it's ambitious for sure, but I would say based off my knowledge of the region and the companies and people there, they have they don't they back up their talk, right? I don't know if these titles are going to be AAA, best quality, lots of fun. These are expensive things and there's no shortage of money there, but there is a shortage of talent. We see it everywhere. And that was the most compelling part to me about the Bungie acquisition from Sony was $1 billion of that went to keeping the talent happy because that's really the hardest. You can spend a lot in a lot of areas, but the talent is a highly competitive thing, and it's a very difficult thing. I think not everyone like you, Paul, was willing to move their lives to halfway across the world, no matter where in the world that is, Middle East, South America, anywhere. That's a big endeavor. So I had a great time there. I think that region is looking about gaming in the right lens and has the right plan for it, but it's going to be a challenge, I think, to recruit talent to the kingdom to build these games. I think if they were to make one hit, however, or two hits in the next 5-10 years that they've created, that would be a mega success story. So, hope they get the 30, but I don't think you need to shoot that high to have a win here.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like obviously a lot of the ideas outlined in this strategy are very familiar to me. Eerily familiar. And so I believe in the strategy. I buy the strategy. I also think they have no question. They have commitment. They have vision. Right. They have the resources. Like all of the big like all the big boxes you usually need to check to see something like this come to life. They've checked those boxes. And if you look at the success of Gamers 8, which was their 8-week like big festival in Riyadh, um, I think they've proven that they can serve the local market, no question, right? Like they can put on gaming activations, events. They can get the local population talking about gaming, thinking about gaming, going to a gaming thing. And I think Gamers 8 has proved that at least they can execute locally, right? And that it works there. I think the big remaining question mark for me, and I think you pointed to it, is there the talent there to build this grand vision? I think that's no matter where in the world this was, that's going to be hard, right? If you were in China, I would say, well, where are you going to get all the people to build this thing? So I think that's definitely a challenge, and I think it's even more subtle than that. You need a lot of people at the top who understand gaming at a very subtle level, right? Like have played the games the last 20 years of their lives, know what's going on, know what people want, know what gamers want, speak their language, but also understand the business side of it. And if I think of how many people there are like that in the world, I can probably count on two hands. And so it's like, well, if there's 10 people in the world who fill that bucket, you basically have a vision here where you probably need to get 50% of those people to go to Saudi Arabia. And that's maybe money solves that problem. I don't know if money solves that problem. But it is a challenge, no question.
I would say more likely than not, that might be one of the few problems in this scenario that money can't solve because when you're talking about expertise at that level, that's the Tiger Woods live story all over again, where the money doesn't change his legacy or what it's worth to him, right? There has to be something more to it. It has to be right. It has
True,
to
but they
improve
got the
upon his
5 out of
legacy.
10 who were willing to come for the
They
bag,
did. They did. They
right?
did. Absolutely.
And so you only need 5 out of the 10, right? Like there's probably, like I said, there's probably 10 people at the very top who can execute on a vision this big. And
I'd say Liv
so
got 8 out of the 10 on that front, by the way.
and then the question becomes, if they're coming just for the bag, are they there for a year, 2 years, or do they see this through for the next 10 years? And do they truly care about building out what is a grand vision? That's always sort of the problem when the lure is the bag and only the bag. But again, like when you have virtually unlimited resources and this grand of a vision, it's hard to bet against. And I wouldn't be betting against. Obviously, I'm not. I moved here, right? Like I'm clearly on the side of betting that this thing comes to fruition. Um, I just think it'll be interesting to see if they avoid what are clearly some speed bumps ahead, right? Because it's an ambitious plan with very aggressive timelines, which I love. But there are speed bumps that maybe or maybe they're not aware of, and so it'll be interesting to see how they navigate that. And Holodeck being here will for sure be a part of this. So obviously, will be interesting to be a part of it. But I think more countries should be doing this. Let's put it that way. I think it's silly that you have major economies like the US, even like let's go right to sort of what should be the most obvious. Like, where's the national strategy around gaming? Like, where is that vision building to say we want to make this a $2 trillion industry by 2030? The US could absolutely do that if there was actual conviction around it and actual leadership around it. And there just isn't. So you have to appreciate what Saudi Arabia and MBS. I mean, there's no lack of vision there and no lack of big thinking. Jimmy, I don't know if you had any other thoughts before we move on here.
We got a good amount of stories to get through, and I know fans already know we're fans of that region, so to speak. So let's keep it rolling.
Let's talk about, you mentioned skins in the beginning. We talked about this one was an interesting one because the number just jumped out at me, but we were talking about skins and COD. And here, the headline: Valorant Champions Bundle raises over 32 million in revenue. So Valorant, they had a bundle where they were selling skins, obviously. And as part of this, they introduced a limited time Champions Bundle and comprised 4 or 5 different skins. Like connected to the Champions Finals, obviously, which were happening in Turkey. And 50% of the net proceeds were going to go directly to teams participating in this championship. And some of these items were never going to go back into the store. And they sold $32 million worth of this bundle, with 16 million going to the teams. I thought it was a cool story because this is like Dota's yearly, international, whatever they call it, that they sell the compendium, or that they raise $10 zillion for every year for for TI. Are you surprised at the number here, Jimmy? 32 million on one bundle?
Yeah, I'm surprised at a lot of this, honestly. 32 million's a lot, especially for a digital good, right? Where there's a false sense of scarcity because they just decided to limit when it would be available and when you could buy it. Just congrats to that team, honestly, that created that. The skins are awesome. I think I've always liked the Valorant skins. I do have a little bit of beef with my friends over at Valorant because I remember purchasing some skins in the beta that didn't transfer over when the game
True,
finally was
actually.
released, and I was like, so I'm out 10 or 20 bucks or whatever. And you guys know who you are, and I take Venmo and PayPal. But but no, these skins are really cool. I think they look awesome. It's a ton of money. To me, the headliner of this story is the teams are taking 50% of that. Like, what a generous split. What a massive win for anyone that got to partake in that rev share, because I mean, they're going to do this every year. They're going to do this 5, 6 times a year now.
But this is not new. Again, TI, like Dota and TI, they do this exact thing. And this is how the prize pool for TI is so big, because they sell this bundle ahead of time. It's exactly the same model. And I'm not even sure. I think it's also a 50-50 split for Dota. It may be even more than 50-50, to be honest. Like, it's not new. I think I continue to be surprised at the engagement with Valorant, because anecdotally it feels like the game sort of went away, at least from a player perspective. Not went away, that's maybe too harsh, but it's like anecdotally the game doesn't feel nearly as hyped as the numbers suggest. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a kind of a down year in gaming in terms of new releases, and a lot of the hype is really more around the content creators these days and less around the esports orgs and the players. There's been a massive shift, right, towards content creation. So I see what you're saying there in terms of just certain games that don't have a lot of hype at the moment. I think that Valorant has been chugging along in a steady pace where we've had a lot of different headlines over the launch of the league and the different structures for which they were accepting applications and how that would look internationally as well as domestically. So I mean, they've been in the headlines. We've been talking about them, but I agree with you that that excitement over one thing or another has not felt the same, at least for me this year with all the games. Honestly, I haven't really felt super excited about gaming since like season 3 of Fortnite. So maybe I'm just, an old man yelling at clouds at this point. But
This validates the whole conversation. I mean, things I've been saying, but also what Arnold from Genji had said, right? Which is, this is a far, like, selling digital goods like this seems to be a way better way of funneling revenue and profits to teams who participate in these leagues, and making the whole ecosystem more sustainable.
it's the only way that makes it worth it for the teams, right? And we know that a lot of the teams that we've had on the show have been saying that. I know, well, I don't want to talk too much internally about XSET, but the teams are looking are looking to work with the publishers, and the teams have a lot of leverage here, I think. And again, kudos to the ones that are making it happen, that are keeping the teams happy, because it's a rinse and repeat. This is an easy to monetize thing, and it's one of those things, like you said, that can drive excitement around the game. And Riot was one of the first ones that we covered almost a year ago that said, hey, we know the esports business is not necessarily doing all that great. We're redirecting that towards skins and in-game transactions. That's kind of the point here. So the fact that they're letting teams get a cut of that keeps everyone alive. That keeps everything running smoothly. So again, I didn't know Dota was 50% also, Paul. That seemed like a lot to me. But either way, like I said, as long as the teams are happy, you're going to have a thriving ecosystem. Because if you don't have anyone competing, then you just kind of have a fun game, which is a necessary component. But I think you're leaving a lot on the table without the second part of that.
Well, you mentioned hype, Jimmy. So I think it's important that we get to the max hype story, or maybe most hype game of all time story, this week. And that, we have to talk about the leak here. We're getting into the juicy stuff. We have leak stuff. We have drama stuff coming. But the leak here, GTA 6 in the news, and the headline, 90 videos of Rockstar's unreleased Grand Theft Auto 6 game surface online in massive leak. So more than 90 gameplay videos of GTA 6 were leaked. Rockstar confirmed the leak is real, and the user claiming responsibility says they could leak more data soon. So there were actual gameplay clips that were posted online. Source code was posted, assets, test builds, etc. And the hacker reportedly also took credit for a cyber attack on Uber. So,
did the hacker take credit for that? I thought Uber had suspected him of being the same hacker. I didn't realize that. I knew that there was a common thread there. Interesting.
supposedly the hacker even wrote that they're looking to negotiate a deal.
I saw that. That's so dumb.
So
Straight up blackmail.
they want a payday, I guess.
Yeah.
But so the leak's real. They actually posted. We don't. I mean, I don't need to play it here or anything like that. I'm sure everyone has seen sort of the leaked videos or leaked footage by now. But what do you make of this, Jimmy? And how much do you think, from a business perspective, this hurts the game or helps the game? Like, where are you on this one?
You know, I think there are instances where this is wrong, but in general, I think there's no such thing as bad press. I think we were already excited for GTA 6. Everyone already knew it was in development. The sneak peek, I mean, if you measure the amount of impressions that all of these stories are getting, that all of Grand Theft Auto community is kind of receiving from the result of this, uh, you know, it's control of your brand image versus just, pleasing the fans. And I think everyone's happy to know, one, that it's in development, confirmed, because again, they also Rockstar also said, hey, yeah, that's ours, right? So that's nice to know. But two, if you actually watch the video, looks great, and I don't know how early this development is, but it already looks great. So I'm sure there's a lot of polish to be done. There's a lot of story writing to be done, a lot of quests and testing that need to be done. But just visually and aesthetically, the few little things that I watched all looked phenomenal. So I think this is a win. This is confirmation of the most popular game, the sequel to one of the most popular games over the last 10 years. And again, it dominated the news this week. So
okay, so put your lawyer hat on, right? Put your lawyer hat on. They catch the guy who did the hack. Okay. Now Rockstar wants to go after the hacker and wants to claim damages. Are there damages here? Because to your point, it's like, well, this is good publicity. The game didn't look that bad. It's like free marketing. Can they claim any damages here?
Yeah, I mean, incredibly, incredibly hard to monetize, even if this were a business 1/100th the size, right? And a game that 1/100th the amount of people, 1/1000th the amount of people played. Even if this were a lot smaller, I'm saying, in terms of the scope of damage, the scope of money to be made, it's always a very hard thing to prove in a court of law when you have speculation like this. So, um, that's what I'm saying. The damage here is more brand. It's more brand facing. It's like, what are they going to say, that they sold X many fewer units because people knew about the game, so they were less excited about it? All the evidence points to the contrary, that this is increasing the hype because people are seeing how great the game is. Realistically, and you and I have this talk all the time, the difference between justice, I think, and business are kind of confused. And I don't think this ever even sees a courtroom. I mean, even if they caught the guy, I don't think it ever sees a courtroom. He'd get penalized for, criminally before anything civilly were to take place. And he's not going to have the assets to cover any type of civil suit anyways.
So if you're the head at Rockstar, you don't fall for the blackmail attempt either. You don't care if he releases more footage or more source code or.
No, I think you double down on your security. I think you work with the FBI to try and bring this guy to justice, and then you let the criminal court do its thing, but you don't need to squeeze out pennies from someone that doesn't have it. You got all you would have made in free press here.
Interesting.
I think they do want to. I think they do want to send a message for future hackers and future breaches of this nature, whether internal or external, where they don't want this type of leak. So that's why you do comply with authorities and you do whatever you can public facing to show that this is a serious issue, that you're not letting it slide, to try and act in that way as a deterrent. But it's really only for that sake. I think. I don't think there's any tangible or takeaway other than that.
I mean, Jimmy, do you think that there's a conclusion here which says maybe Dr. Disrespect's sort of method of producing games and doing marketing around games is the way to go, so it avoids this? Because it sort of feels like when you have a game, any AAA game that's in development for years, call it, right? More than 2 or 3 years. It sort of feels like it's inevitable that at some point something will leak. Like you just can't control that tightly hundreds of developers and all kinds of, assets and programmers and code and right. Like at some point things will leak when you have that big of an operation over that many years. So is the conclusion then from a business standpoint that everyone should just open the kimono and just, Rockstar should never have been this closed-lipped about GTA. They should have been talking about it for the last 2 years. They should have been showing all the milestones and updates and artwork and right, like leak it themselves and control the narrative and build hype over 2 or 3 years rather than what they did, which was say absolutely nothing, literally absolutely nothing, with the understanding that maybe these leaks are now inevitable.
That's a tough one, right? And I think it's a case by case thing also. I think if you're constantly communicating and showing off and showing what you're working on, but maybe pushing date, then you might have to push production dates or you have to answer more questions. You get a cyberpunk kind of situation all over again, where maybe it doesn't live up to expectations or it gets delayed and delayed because you're talking about it for so long. On the other end of that spectrum, if you are tight-lipped and successful with it, you get the next Baby Yoda, right? That no one knew about, that Grogu was so huge with The Mandalorian. It was the best kept secret. So there are big wins, I think, when you can do it successfully, and there are big failures when you're overly communicative. I can't tell you which is the right path and which is the wrong one. All I can say is with regard to GTA 6, this leak, I think, helped them. And if they were talking a lot about it, that it was in production, even if we hadn't seen gameplay, it just wouldn't have gotten the hype that this had. I do know in music, leaks happen all the time, purposefully or not, to generate hype around albums and to generate beef, right, between rival labels and rappers and musicians. But I think it's kind of a case by case basis. I don't know if there's a blanket rule here or not.
Jimmy, I'm surprised you didn't go. I thought you were going to take that thought one step further. By the way, Super's in here. Hey, Super.
Hey, Super.
Who does a lot of our short form content. So if you follow us on TikTok, the man with the orange hat and the mustache, gaming superstar in his own right. No, with the tinfoil hat theory, do you think Rockstar made all of this up? Right? There's like this very cynical me that says maybe this is just like Kim Kardashian sex tape leak, right? Like this was not an accident. This leak was planned.
It's a little different, Paul, right? Because they're talking about hackers and getting the FBI involved and also claiming the Uber hack as well. When
You
you
do know
cross
Kim
over,
claimed the same thing, right? That they were going to get the FBI involved.
you're bordering on that Jussie Smollett issue, right? Was that guy with the alleged hate crime when he had hired the guy to do it to himself? Or I might be
I mean, it would be
misconstruing that
kind of
story, but
genius, right?
that just rubs me the wrong way. It's so unethical.
But kind of genius marketing. Because
Clever to
a leaked clip gets people, it's tittillating, it's exciting, right? Oh my god, I'm seeing something I shouldn't, right?
Yeah.
Versus just dropping a video of gameplay footage. Yeah, for sure we'd get a lot of attention, but nowhere near the amount this got. You hate this idea.
I don't like forcing those situations. They just it just rubs me the wrong way, honestly. I understand how clever that can be and how you can use that to your benefit. I understand that leaks, like you said, they have that allure to them, but that's nothing that I would recommend in any boardrooms that I'd be a part of.
I think there's I think there's a 50% chance that they leak this that this is all manufactured. That's where I'm at on this. But maybe I'm wrong. It just seems too he's like asking for money. He's the guy who hacked Uber. Like I don't know. It just feels Feels like someone scripted this a little bit. All right, let's talk about something else here. What do we want to talk about? We want to talk about, there's a bunch of Twitch drama, which we can get to. Before we get to that, I do want to just say this live stream, this weekly news show, is very generously sponsored by YouGov. YouGov produces the absolute best data on games, gamers, esports fans all around the world. They produce something called living data. It's data constantly being updated. They're constantly keeping it fresh, so you have all the up-to-date, most actionable information possible. If you're looking to sell to the gaming audience, you're looking to market to the gaming audience, you're looking to access the gaming industry in some way, you need to talk to YouGov first. I highly recommend two things: going to yougov.com/BOE. That's the first thing. You can get a bunch of free data there. You can check out some of the past YouGov Insights segments that we did with them, where we highlight some of the latest data and research that they've produced. But the best thing you can do is get in touch with them directly, and you can go through us. Jimmy or I are happy to make an introduction personally, or you can reach out to YouGov directly through that link, yougov.com/BOE. We thank them for their support. Jimmy, we've got Twitch drama to talk about this week. I don't know where you want to start because there's just so much of it. So let's start with the revenue split drama, because that sort of came last. And the headline here is Twitch denies requests for 70-30 sub-split due to high cost of running site. So basically, Twitch, streamers have been asking Twitch for a higher rev split instead of the 50-50 that everyone sort of gets by default, giving a 70-30 split. Giving a 70-30 split was the thinking here. Some of the bigger streamers have deals where they get that 70-30 split because their deals are like one-on-one with Twitch. But for the most part, every other streamer's stuck at 50-50. And Twitch basically has come out and said, no, everyone's going to be at 50-50. Even the big streamers are going to go down to 50-50, except, and it wasn't said, but it was XQC who confirmed it. I saw it on his stream. Except for the people like him who have one-on-one contracts. They're protected, like the very, very biggest streamers. And Twitch's claim, their argument is that the cost of streaming is very high. So the cost is significant, right? That, it says live video costs for 100 concurrent user streamer who streams 200 hours a month is more than $1,000 a month. Just to be clear, for the big streamers, they're going to get the higher split for the first 100,000 of revenue and then 50-50 after. So the first 100,000 is still somewhat protected. Now, how many people who make 100,000 a year on Twitch is very small. Just to be clear, it's maybe dozens of people, like not much more than that. So Twitch, the streamers are saying it's Twitch being greedy. Twitch is saying, no, this is all like we can afford to run our business. What do you think of the whole revenue split thing with streamers, Jimmy?
It's really messy. Really messy. Big mess that they created for themselves. Very smart that they're honoring those agreements with people like XQC and other top streamers. I mean, not only do they have to contractually, but you want to keep those guys happy because they have the largest voices. As far as the rest of it goes, I mean, they have terms of service with, when you make partner, when you make affiliate, it's Twitch's rules, right? This is their playground, and if you want to play in it, you kind of got to follow those rules. If they're changing that structure, it doesn't matter what the reason is. That's just kind of what you're bound by, and you're lucky to be there profiting in the first place, I think. But it just doesn't look good. And claiming that it's because of cost also doesn't look good, because they built this, right? Like this was they knew when they were creating these tools what the economics were. And so it kind of does feel like a little greedy to me, like there's some change there. Maybe they built this in the beginning and knew they were going to be running at a deficit, but were willing to take that on in order to build up an audience and build everything that they eventually wanted to grow into, and knew that they would have to change it eventually. But yeah, I mean, you can't make this type of announcement and not expect it to leave a bad taste in everyone's mouths. And I would also feel like, yeah, that's a very small amount of the streamers that it affects. But this is it's their game to lose right now. They have the dominant market share, they have the best product. But if someone that was happy there wasn't already looking for another alternative, it's more incentive now to say, well, if our revenue is not the same, where else can I be making money, or where else should I be looking? So I don't know. I just feel like there's not a lot of positives to this story, honestly, and unfortunately.
I mean, it feels like what I've been saying for literally a decade now is all starting to come true, in the sense that none of these platforms really are sustainable. And the
Hmm.
reason none of them are sustainable is because we live in an age where we are immune, for the most part, to traditional advertising, right? Like, again, and when I was building a company that was building, like when I was building a company doing shoppable video technology, and I was saying YouTube's a scam, right? What I meant was people aren't watching the ads on YouTube. And so at some point, all this comes to a head, right? People stop advertising on YouTube, the creators make less money. Like, all of this at some point had to blow up. And I feel like this is just expected at this point, from my perspective, where the business models of Twitch, of YouTube, of all these platforms are relatively unsustainable. You can't have only the top 100 people making a living out of this, because you have 20,000 people that want to make a living out of this, or 100,000 people that want to make, like, the amount of people who all want to be full-time streamers or full-time content creators is massive. And you have a lot of people putting in the work and making nothing, right? So that's unsustainable. On the other side, the platforms are not profitable because they're either paying huge amounts for talent, or they're running ads that the advertisers probably don't see a whole lot of return on, because everyone's just skipping the ads or blocking the ads, right? So you have sort of an unsustainable situation on both sides of the equation. It's not good for the creators, and it's not great for the platform. And so, like, it's easy to jump on Twitch and say this is just pure greed, and okay, like, but if they go out of business, and yeah, I get it, they're owned by Amazon, but at some point Amazon will say, hey, this thing is burning $1 billion a year, why aren't we shutting it down, right? Like, just because it's within a bigger company doesn't mean it can just lose money forever. And so there has to be, I think, at some point there will be a reckoning where it's no longer good enough for the majority of creators, and the platforms aren't making money, and everyone just needs to do a total rethink of how these things get monetized. And I believed at one point shoppable video was probably the solution, at least for YouTube. I don't know if that's the answer today. Let me read Matt's comments here. Matt says Valkyrie and Asmongold have already come out against this. I mean, obviously, it's like, if I cut your salary, are you going to be for it? No, I mean, they're obviously going to come out against it. Matt says maybe this plays into YouTube Gaming's content creator signing plan. Just wait for Twitch to change policies, lose creators, and then YouTube swipes them up. I mean, I feel like, if anything, Matt, this makes it cheaper for YouTube to get creators, right? Because again, the size of the bag they have to offer gets smaller and smaller the worse the monetization on something like Twitch gets. So
That's what I was saying too, that this really, there's no positive spin here. I will say, Paul, you could look at, I don't know, Apple, for example. Apple Maps, definitely not making them any money, losing money each year, but a service that they wanted to offer, to their users. But I would expect as Twitch got bigger and bigger that their systems would become more efficient and better at extracting profit, not more expensive. So that also to me was a drop in the feels like greed bucket.
I mean, that's easy to say. I also think Twitch is artificially propping up creators on its platform. And I'll tell you how. It's Twitch Prime. You take out the free subscription you get with Amazon Prime,
Sure.
half of the top creators go away. Half, like, their income gets cut in half. So, like, they're also artificially propping up a lot of these creators with lots of dollars. I just, there's fault on both sides, right? Like, it's not so clear cut in my mind that this is just greed on Twitch's part. It's more like Twitch, YouTube, all these platforms have to figure out how to be profitable and yet still be viable places for people to make a living, or at least a side living, right? Because you can't expect people to stream 12 hours a day for 10 years only to make 50 grand a year. I don't think this is a sustainable model long term, unless they become more like essentially, ironically, all these platforms become more and more like traditional TV networks, where you have 10 shows, 10 creators who make all the money, who draw all of the audience, right? During the day, you have your prime time hours, and everyone else, so sorry, right? Like, it's not about those people anymore. It's about the 10 or 12 biggest creators and who they can draw. And if that's the outcome, which I think is where we're heading, then I do think there are opportunities for other platforms. There are opportunities for other platforms to come in and see if they can address the longer tail, not the long tail necessarily, but the longer tail. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or
No, these are all good points. I think I'm curious what our audience thinks, but I know we're at an awkward time today, so I'm happy to leave the offline listeners with some food for thought there.
all right, let's continue with the Twitch drama here, because there was another big piece of Twitch news this week, and that was their stance on gambling. So here's what happened, and this story's a bit old, but the headline here is top Twitch streamers like Pokimane, Mizkif threatened strike after $200,000 gambling scam. So Pokimane, Mizkif, I don't know who this Devin Nash guy is, want Twitch to ban gambling sponsorships on the platform. Now, all of this came out of an original scandal, which was Slicker. So Slicker let me give a bit of context here. Slicker, who is a streamer on Twitch, was revealed to have scammed all kinds, I don't even know, dozens of other streamers out of money to feed his gambling addiction. So he was a gambling addict. He hit up a bunch of streamers for money. A lot of them gave him money. And all this came to light that he had basically stolen from all these to the tune of $300,000 because of his gambling addiction. So it's actually 300,000, not 200,000. And what happened as a consequence is there's a group of streamers that all came out and said, this should be a wake-up call, right? We need to ban gambling on Twitch, notably Mizkif and Pokimane. And obviously you had people like XQC and Trainwrecks who gamble on Twitch quite a bit and make a lot of money gambling on Twitch, who, while weren't pro gambling, felt like it wasn't Twitch's place to at least ban it. I think that's maybe a fair way of saying it. Now, what ended up happening is Twitch released a statement where they are banning gambling finally. So the pressure from some of these streamers was great enough that Twitch felt the need to ban gambling. I'm curious if, again, we're a business podcast, right? From a business perspective, Jimmy, what you think of the ban on gambling on Twitch, if you think it's a good move for them, if you think it's silly. I'm curious where you are on this issue.
Yeah, it's definitely a delicate one. From a business perspective, I think gambling has really propped up the video game competitive gaming industry. I think there's a lot of opportunities, and we hear a lot of stories and have met with a lot of people that all are involved in competitive or wager and skill-based games in one fashion or another. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities that you're missing out on by keeping that off of your platform. Morally, religiously, other reasons, of course, to not include it, I think, where a lot of people would agree with this stance uh, for reasons such as this, right? Where you have people with weaker constitutions that can get taken advantage of or that can take advantage of others. But I just it's a slippery slope to me. You next thing you take off alcohol sponsors or you take off caffeine sponsors. I mean, I just don't know where the line is. And in law school, that's one of the things they teach us is everything's a reasonable standard, and you have to kind of find where that line is because what is enough or what is too much and where is that really drawn? So again, for me, I always thought gambling platforms went kind of hand in hand with competitive esports because it was a thing that people wagered on, either through skill or through chance or a combination of the two. Um, I totally can sympathize and understand the frustration and the upset here. I just think that's an inherent evil if you're going to support it. But if you're not, like I said, now you're opening the door to other industries that could have similar objectionable interests or issues that are now at stake here.
Yeah, it's that slippery slope that's the big
Right,
problem for me, Jimmy. Right? It's
right.
just like it reeks of such hypocrisy. And listening, I watch a lot of Twitch. Twitch is always on when I'm working. Right? It's always on my second or third monitor. So I watched all of this unfold. I watched all the Slicker drama. I watched Pokemon's take and Trainwrecks and XQC and Miskip. Like I consumed all of this firsthand. I will tell you, you should not be taking any kind of advice from Pokimane. She consistently has the worst takes of any streamer I've ever seen. I don't know how she has such a large platform. I don't fundamentally get it. I don't find her entertaining or interesting. I mean, that's maybe an aside, but I fundamentally disagreed with everything, all of her takes on this. So, a lot of the noise was from her, which again, I'm not sure why it was her business either, because she doesn't gamble on stream and she's not exclusive to Twitch that I know of. So, like, uh, I'm not sure why she felt the need to chime in, but I will say I think it's pure hypocrisy, total and utter hypocrisy. Because what I don't understand is the ban on gambling was very specific from Twitch. They said we're going to ban it because it's not legal in the US, basically, because we're going to ban it on Twitch. That was I'm paraphrasing, I'm sort of summarizing, but that was basically what they said. And what I don't understand is, well, smoking weed is still illegal in the US, right? There are some states that allow it, but if you're going by this sort of rule that if it's illegal in the US, we're not going to put it on the platform. Well, then do you stop everyone from smoking weed on Twitch? Because there's a lot of people doing that. And Twitch at some point decided sort of everything goes on their platform. At some point they decided we don't want to be gaming only, right? We're going to have all these other channels, whether it's hot tubs or IRL or just chatting or dancing or singing or whatever it is, right? Morally good or morally bad. This is again a subjective thing, but they decided we're going to allow everything. And to now cave to a minority of people with loud voices, which is what Pokimane and her group are, right? Like, I think is hypocritical, and I don't understand the business decision behind it because I'm sure there's significant lost revenue for Twitch. I don't buy the argument that there's a whole bunch of sponsors now that will come in because there's no gambling on Twitch. I mean, those same sponsors can tune into Twitch and see, very morally objectionable things that aren't just gambling. And if you're worried about your kid getting lured in by, gamblers on Twitch, Well, there's a lot of other, again, morally objectionable things they could be lured in on at Twitch, like with watching Twitch. So like you probably shouldn't have your 9-year-old watching Twitch to begin with. And so like it comes back to this slippery slope of this seems reactionary. Twitch is reacting to a vocal minority. And I think this is always a bad business decision. It's always bad for business because it's not well thought out. There's no strategy or vision behind it. There's no logic or reasoning behind it. It's, oh my God, someone complained and put a hashtag. Let's put out a statement and do something to shut them up. And long term, this will hurt Twitch. I think I'm consistently amazed at Twitch's failures, given how inept YouTube gaming is. Like Twitch should be running away with this thing, and yet we have such ineptitude on both sides. It feels like nobody's winning. You know what I mean? Like the total lack of any kind of ability to make good decisions, both from YouTube gaming and from Twitch, consistently amazes me. That you have such large organizations so poorly managed, making such poor decisions so consistently. So I don't know. That's my maybe unpopular take on this, but if you don't like watching gambling on Twitch, don't watch gambling on Twitch. I mean, I don't really understand the issue here.
I think we're in agreement, Paul, on a lot of fronts. Like you said, with cannabis, or like I said, with alcohol, or caffeine even, or think about pornography and all the OnlyFans, content creators out there that are promoting their OnlyFans. By succumbing to this one pressure, you're putting all of these other industries and collaborations or what have you at risk, or otherwise you end up just kind of walking back, right? You're going to have to walk back on your word and on something that you took a stance on and undo it down the line. So there's no right answer there. Either everything's okay or none of it is, honestly.
It's interesting though, because like, and I go back to linear TV, like TV networks are policed, right? They're regulated. What you can or can't show on TV, there is a regulatory body that decides this, right? Like how much swearing you can have, how much, right? There are bodies that regulate this. The online platforms have always escaped this kind of regulation because I think the underlying idea is you make a choice to go and watch Twitch, right? It's versus if I turn the TV on, NBC is there, CBS is there, it exists, it's there whether I want it or not. And so that has to be regulated because any 5-year-old can go put this on and we have to be careful what the 5-year-olds see. Whereas an online platform is a choice, you shouldn't have these problems, right? Someone made a choice to go watch XQC gamble. I don't see how that is an issue. And if your 14-year-old's watching XQC gamble and you're the parent, it's kind of your fault. It's not XQC's fault and it's not Twitch's fault. Like, what are you doing as the parent? It bothers me that these become business issues and these affect the business, because I do think this was an interesting way of helping some content creators monetize their content. I mean, it's just,
right.
There's probably a dozen creators that have lost a ton of revenue as a consequence of this, and fine. I'm sure, XQC and Aiden Ross and some of these creators are going to be perfectly fine. Trainwrecks, they all are entertainers beyond just gambling. But I think it's it shows poor decision making from Twitch itself. All right, let's move on. We won't go into it. I will just say there was another piece of Twitch drama this week involving Mizkif and Maya and this guy named Crazy Slick. Not to be confused with Slicker, the other drama. So Twitch saw a lot of drama this week, a lot. This one more serious and legal in nature, so I don't want to go down this path because there's not really a business conversation here. Just to say that at least my take on this is, you know, the landmines of all of these public, very, very public, they're companies, right? Like these streamers, they're essentially companies. The landmines involved, when you're this public with your life and streaming your life, and makes for tricky business. And I think this is the problem for Twitch, right? These are the bigger problems for Twitch. The gambling stuff are relatively easy business decisions, like these personal, and allegations of sexual assault and all these kinds of things. These are much trickier for Twitch to have to police and have to decide who goes and who stays on their platform. I don't envy those business decisions whatsoever. But we'll see how that plays out. I will just say, and Jimmy, I know you don't want to dive into this, but the next 6 months for Twitch, I think, are going to be very telling, right? We're going to see how they work through all of this drama and all of these issues. And I think it will either change the face of the platform completely, or they will solve all this, or they will sink under it. But I think the next 6 months are going to be interesting to watch how the platforms address all of these issues and all this drama, whether it's Twitch, but YouTube also. Like, YouTube's not immune from any of it.
No, the only thing I wanted to add or say is honestly, whether it's criminal acts of a very serious nature, or equally damaging acts of that subject someone to civil liability for using their platform for false speech, because we don't know what the facts are or what's going to happen. But whether or not something occurred, or whether or not someone's saying something occurred without all the facts and using their platform to assert false speech, those are the real issues that Twitch needs to be looking in, not really gambling, in my opinion. This is where this is a much more pressing, much more serious issue.
Definitely more serious. And like I said, we're a business podcast, so we're not going to comment on anything related to drama or criminal activities, or our focus is always what are the business issues here. And there's not really any there for us to discuss. All right, let's talk about, Jimmy. I've got a couple more stories and then we'll wrap up here. This one, interesting. EVGA in the news. So EVGA produces video cards primarily. They also produce power supplies and a few other things, but 80% of their business is video cards. And the headline here is EVGA withdrawing from video card market. Company says it won't carry the next generation of video cards, citing issues with NVIDIA partnership. So basically what they did was they got together a bunch of YouTubers, tech YouTubers, and they announced that they were no longer be making video cards at all, so of any kind, but that they were ending a decades-long partnership with NVIDIA, and video cards is 78% of their revenue. So they're basically shutting down 78% of their business. And basically the reason is that they're fed up with NVIDIA. That basically they said specific issues cited by EVGA included controlling behavior by NVIDIA, including restrictions on how much or how little EVGA can charge for cards, combined with NVIDIA offering its own Founders Edition cards to customers at a discount. I'm curious, Jimmy, what you think of this. It's weird. You don't often see a company shut down 80% of their business over what feels like a disagreement.
That's the headline here. It's that it's 80% of their, because a disagreement or just being unhappy with a relationship, maybe that justifies a much smaller termination, where it's 10% of our business, 15, something that we can sustain without. It feels like NVIDIA is just saying, hey, here's your cut, and it keeps getting smaller and smaller, even though they're really churning along here and doing quite well. I can't believe that, though. I mean, 80% of their business is a lot larger than I thought it would be for them to just shut down. What are they going to do if not this? How many layoffs are there going to be, right? Who are they reporting to that greenlit the termination of that agreement? Are they coming out with their own competing card? Maybe there's a rival in the midst that they're working on a deal with. I'm not sure. It sounds like they're fed up with this partner, right? That it's not a great relationship, but to keep the lights on, you put up with a lot. And when it's 80% of your lights, you'll put up with even more. So you got to think there has to be something here that we're not thinking of. Whether, like I said, there's another agreement in the midst with a competitor, or maybe on their own, or I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of, honestly. Paul, what do you think?
Look, they've said there's really only one other company they could work with. It's AMD, right? It's the only other company. Well, maybe Intel, because Intel now has their own line of consumer graphics cards. So other than AMD and Intel, there's no one else they can work with to make graphics cards, right? That's just the reality. The graphics card business is 3 players today, consumer graphics cards. So if that's the case, and they've said we're not going to work with Intel or AMD, they said that specifically. Now, the reason they said that, what people are sort of guessing the reason they said that is they're leaving the door open to make sort of amends with Nvidia. And supposedly Nvidia is ruthless. Like if you go and do a deal with AMD, they never look at you ever again, kind of thing, right? So they purposely, I feel like, said we're not doing a deal, like we're not dating anyone else. This is just about us and Nvidia, sort of thing. They also said they're not laying anyone off, which I don't know how you lose 80% of your business and don't lay anyone off. Now, I don't know how long that's true. I don't know if that's only in their like main office and they're not counting all the layoffs like at the factories or whatever, right? Like the devil's in the details on that one, and I don't have all the specifics. I think the more interesting question is what is going on in what is maybe the most critical part of the gaming industry today, right? Like, because there's really 2 important pieces of the gaming puzzle. There's the people who make the games, and then there's the people who make the technology to enable the games. And Nvidia today has a very dominant controlling stake of the consumer graphics market, right? They produce the software and the hardware, right? Like they own the stack completely. And it used to be that they depended on companies like EVGA to package their chips into finished graphics cards and market them and sell them and deal with returns, et cetera, right? All the kind of headaches NVIDIA wasn't in the business of doing, right? They were in the business of shipping chips to these companies and then not worrying about it. NVIDIA is increasingly becoming more vertically integrated, I think because they're trying to capture more dollars out of the stack, more margin in the stack, right? And the more scale you have, the more margin you have with hardware. And so instead of producing 100,000 Founders Edition cards, if they can push people like EVGA out of the market, they have reason to build 1 million Founders Edition cards, right, of their own cards. And so I think there's this interesting sort of play happening where NVIDIA is trying to become more vertically integrated at greater scale. And I would not be surprised to see other OEMs getting pushed out, other makers of NVIDIA graphics cards, whether it's MSI or Asus or, you name it. Gigabyte, like I'm trying to think of everyone who produces NVIDIA cards today, not to mention, some of the China, like the Zotac, some of the Chinese manufacturers. I wouldn't be surprised if more of them are getting pushed out. Now, is this purposeful or is this by accident because NVIDIA is just like they're a bunch of assholes because they're a monopoly and they can push people or partners around? I don't know. But it feels a bit purposeful to me. It's just I'm still scratching my head at why EVGA would give up 80% of their business. And maybe it's just not worth the hassle, right? Maybe this was just too many headaches, privately owned company. At some point, maybe you just feel like you had enough.
Yeah, more on that, I'm sure, as the months and weeks unfold, but I think you hit it on its head. Again, limited amount of companies they can go to, if not here, and it just feels purposeful to me as well.
Okay, I've got 2 or 3 more quick stories here. Jimmy, what do you think of this one? This is G2 in the news. Carlos taking 8 weeks unpaid leave because he partied with Andrew Tate. And by the way, rumors are that they lost their Valorant slot.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
I'd have to look at the agreement with Riot on Valorant to kind of
Well, it
better
wasn't announced,
understand.
right? Remember that
Yeah.
they hadn't announced all the slots yet. So the rumor is behind the scenes that Riot has basically cut them out now. They won't be getting a slot. And I think it was confirmed, in fact.
Terrible. I mean, that's a pretty hefty price to pay, honestly, for hanging out with Andrew Tate.
I mean, I also, this is maybe an unpopular take because I agree this is like it's pretty hefty price to pay. But if I'm a venture backed, like if I'm the VC behind the company, I don't want to see my CEO partying on my dime with anyone in general, right? Like it just feel like any party on my dime is unwanted. Now I don't know if that was the case here. I don't know if this was some kind of corporate event or this was just like a personal outing after hours. I would assume it was on company dollars, which is why there's this uproar. I would assume that's maybe an incorrect assumption, but it seems like if it's after hours and it's on his own, seems like a harsh punishment. Again, a little bit of a slippery slope here.
You're the face man of that company, and you're kind of held to a higher standard. So I
True.
understand that part. It just and I was also seeing similarly today the Goldman Sachs CEO getting a lot of backlash because he's a DJ at night and his use of the company jet, which maybe takes
Okay,
him to
well, that's just
concerts
it. If
sometimes,
you're using the company jet, this is what
right?
I mean. If you're partying on company dollars, there's a higher standard, I think. But I also think as a CEO, you are automatically held to a higher standard because you're the face of it. And a lot of these guys are the face of their orgs purposely, right? They like being the face of their org. They put themselves out there. They're not the operations guy behind the scene. They think they're the show.
So I'm less versed in this story though, Paul. There's got to be more to it here, whereas there's some type of activity that they were engaging in that was particularly objectionable, or it can't just be that they were together that is
No,
cause
I
for
think
all of
that's
this
why. I mean,
backlash.
because Andrew Tate has supposedly done some very despicable things.
Gotcha.
So I think it was
Just
just the
just the
association.
sheer relationship and association. Yeah, no, I got it.
Well, he also, I mean, Carlos didn't help himself because I think at first he posted something that's like, I don't even remember. It was a tweet that he took back, but basically said like, who I party with is my business. Like I'll do whatever I want, kind of thing. So like I think his initial reaction rubbed people the wrong way. Um, Again, some of these things also just feel like a bit of a consequence of a lot of venture money going into these orgs with people who just don't have a lot of management experience, right? Or CEO experience. And while this one decision may not be that horrible, or again, we're not here to make that judgment. Um, you would think a more polished CEO, although I guess the Goldman Sachs example is maybe a good counter example. A more polished CEO wouldn't make basic mistakes like this.
Interesting to see what happens after that 8 week period is up. Obviously the loss of the Valorant slot is going to be a huge blow to them. We know Carlos values winning, which is interesting because a lot of orgs are really pivoting towards content and media, and I know G2 still wants to be top tier competitors. Interesting to see who, if anyone, he gets replaced with, as well as how that changes the core DNA of this org. But again, that is a very high price to pay, I think, for something like this, and kind of shows the level to which Riot felt about that relationship, and also, like you said, about how it expects its partners to behave and the face people of its partners to conduct themselves.
Yeah. Okay, two very quick ones here. Wildly popular video game Genshin Impact will be transformed into an anime show. You like this, Jimmy? Anime show, Genshin
A-
Impact based.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not a personal fan of the brand, but anything that gets video games into other medias and expands the IP and makes the fans happy, this is a great idea. And we said more of these were coming, so I'm glad it's starting.
The numbers in this amaze me. 60 million players. They've made 3 billion in revenue. Genshin
Wow.
Impact. So it'll be interesting to see how much of that translates to fans of the show. I think there is so much pent up demand for anything anime and anything new anime, and especially with IP that's as liked as Genshin. This should be a smash hit. I'm surprised this didn't happen sooner, to be honest, but I think this will be a smash hit. Finally, let's talk about Esports Entertainment Group very quickly. In the news this week, $7.5 million offering for what is effectively 60 million shares, 30 million common, 30 million in warrants. Market cap of the whole company, Jimmy's like under 6 million or 7 million now. About 98%. The stock's like down 98% over the last year and change. I'm curious what you think in terms of obviously the company's very poorly run, but I'm curious what you think in terms of what does this do to the chances of like esports betting and online like gambling on esports in general when you have this public of a failure?
I wouldn't limit that to just gambling, honestly. I think when you have this public of a failure, to quote your words, it's detrimental to the industry as a whole because it tells a negative story on everything that's going on here, even though it's not indicative or representative of the good that other businesses are doing or the profit that other businesses are making. It's terrible to see something in the public light like this. Though luckily, and I think collectively agreed that we can attribute this to mismanagement as opposed to a flawed premise or philosophy, right, of the underlying business. Um, Man, I mean, look at this, trading at 15 cents a share right now, and
Yeah.
it was over $15 in less than a year. Like, how is that even possible, right? Um,
I'm amazed. I don't know who. I mean, clearly the people buying these offerings are just flipping them. Would be my guess, because I don't know why else you would be buying the stock right now. But um, I do think, and my thinking on this has evolved over the last couple of years. I do think this is a much tougher sort of segment than people initially thought. Like, I don't think it's a slam dunk, and I think it's going to take real innovation, real thoughtfulness around content strategy, real kind of thoughtfulness around who's our customer and what are we really selling them on. Right? Like, I don't think this is not a simple let's get a casino license, let's put up a website and hope that they come kind of market. Like, it's just not going to happen that way. And maybe that's always been the case, but I think Esports Entertainment Group and some of the other players have sort of demonstrated, ebet, like who got out of esports gambling entirely, um, have demonstrated that this is, I mean, the path is littered with failure right now. That's just the reality. Again, mostly mismanagement probably, but the path is littered with failure. Um, Anyways, I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that. That basically gets us to the end of this week's show, Jimmy. And I know it was obviously a quieter one because it's not our usual day and time. I will say, if you're watching this, listening to this after the fact, we will be back next week at our usual date and time, Wednesdays, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time. Just a reminder, guys, make sure to go follow us everywhere on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn, you name it, all these platforms. We put out content every week. On YouTube, I know like half of you watch our stuff, but don't subscribe to the channel. So make sure to subscribe to the channel because 50% of you are not. We see the data. YouTube gives us the data. So make sure to go do that. Don't miss the podcast episode this week with His Royal Highness Prince Faisal from the Saudi Esports Federation. It was a fun interview. We're going to put out more of these interviews. I did a half dozen of them at the next World Forum in Saudi Arabia with all kinds of people. So look forward to more of those coming out. We're just going to put out more episodes than usual, guys, of the podcast. So stay tuned for those. And Jimmy, thank you as always. Thank you, everyone who was here live. And don't forget the most important thing, guys. The future is fun. We'll see you next week.